This video is sponsored by Squarespace, and you'll hear more about them later in the video. What made Andor a great show? It's not the universe it's in or the IP, but the writers and creators treating the story with maturity. Scenes are written with nuance and are more focused on character building instead of exposition dumping. Darker themes are allowed to flourish and aren't downplayed or sanitized out of fear of offending people, and instead of prioritizing spectacle-based action scenes, that prioritization is placed on the characters and their struggles, creating moments of high and sustained tension. This isn't something that is achievable if you aren't treating your story with a serious approach. Pretty much every Star Wars show and movie in the last decade feels nothing like Andor because they don't follow these fundamentals. They're lazily written stories that place more of an emphasis on action because that's what's entertaining. We gotta have recognizable characters and cameos constantly showing up because that's what drives a high satisfaction rate from fans. This is what I would classify as the Marvelization of Star Wars. This essentially started with The Mandalorian, and to be fair, the show was enjoyable in the beginning, but it devolved into something more fanservice oriented. Evidenced especially by the fact they brought back Grogu in literally 10 seconds flat. From there, everything has been downhill. The Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, Season 3 of The Mandalorian, and that Star Wars show you probably forgot about. All of these shows share something in common in that they lack that maturity from a writing perspective. They're juvenile at best and utterly incompetent at worst. I can't remember a single compelling or well-written segment from any of those examples, and thinking about the prospect of Ahsoka Season 2 and that new Mandalorian and Grogu movie fills me with nothing more than dread. Andor was the last bastion of hope for Star Wars, and it seems like it'll be lucky if Disney learns anything from this show. So, let's lay out to Disney the main lessons to take away from Andor Season 2. Firstly, focus on your goddamn characters. Don't be afraid to have long and introspective dialogue scenes that explore the inner conflicts and turmoils of your main character, while also synergizing with the prevalent themes that the show needs to touch on. Luthen is my favorite character because not only is he an incredible driving force of rebellion, but he's a deeply flawed and conflicted person. He's a walking symbol of turmoil and represents some of the best aspects of Andor, like deceit, conspiracy, and betrayal. The pressure he faces is crushing and suffocates him so much to the point that every scene he's in is riveting. And even with those dark aspects, he has the capacity for compassion as shown in his Spotlight episode, and that's something he suppresses with a darker layer to pursue and realize his goals. Every monologue this character has is straight gas.
I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts.
It's what engaging and intelligent dialogue should sound like, and I'm surprised more writers don't use literary devices or, at the very least, try harder to not make scenes read like exposition word vomits. Now, if I look at any other shows, I don't think I can name a single interesting character besides, I guess, Obi-Wan, but that doesn't really count. And even that show comes nowhere close to realizing his potential.
Hello there.
Every character from these properties are at best bland or completely underutilized, with the writer having no understanding of the character from the get-go. The other aspect of focusing on your characters over the plot is having deeper and more cathartic internal character arcs. Andor probably has one of my favorite arcs in Star Wars of a selfish man turned into a hero fighting for the cause. An arc that is also planned from the start and is sustained through those 2 seasons. Throughout that journey, Cassian is met with constant challenges, major dilemmas, and choices that give him great agency in creating his own path. The plot doesn't drive Cassian, and Cassian is literally defecting and defying orders while trailblazing his own destiny. He does what he thinks is right, and that character agency is what makes him so consistently compelling and entertaining. If you're looking at other shows or movies and are having a hard time in identifying an arc that the character went on, then that probably means it contains poor writing. The plot and the characters not only need to interweave with great synergy, but they need to both have substantial developments and change. For Andor, I do think this aspect could be slightly improved, but more so in the sense that we really needed another season. Its pace and constant year time jumps every 3 episodes made it hard to care about some characters, or made some developments not have enough time to grow on screen. This isn't really a problem with how the show is written, and more in the fact that there were external issues that forced the show into having one last final season. Before going into the next lesson, let's talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the Swiss Army knife of website platforms for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. One such entrepreneur could have been Logan from Andor, since he could have created an online shop with Squarespace, showcasing all of his historic artifacts and selling them online. You can also manage your inventory, there are flexible shipping and pickup options, and setting up payment and checkout is hassle-free. There are also plenty of templates and designs that would elevate your shop into being more professional. Squarespace can be used for a plethora of different types of websites if you're not interested in making a shop. If you want to try out Squarespace, then head to squarespace.com and use my discount code SupercutsDelight to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Now let's get back to the video. The second lesson to learn from Andor is how it's unafraid to approach darker topics from a more adult perspective. This is a major problem that has been bothering me about Star Wars for a long time. It feels like Disney still thinks that their main demographic is children. However, Star Wars has been around for so long that every living generation has been exposed to it. So by default, most people interested in Star Wars are probably adults at this point. Two shows that were casualties of Disney baby-proofing stories and not adopting a more gritty tone were The Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan. It felt like both of these shows were primarily made for a younger demographic, and when that is a priority, the writing ultimately suffers in pretty much every area. Then Andor comes in, where politics, the world, and characters are actually treated seriously and are not bombarded with constant jokes, something that immediately put me off of The Last Jedi.
We will wipe your filth from the galaxy!
Okay, I'll hold.
Hello?
The Empire is intimidating, there's a balance of them being competent, but still making rational mistakes from being outsmarted by the protagonists, and Andor isn't afraid of sitting down the audience and building political tensions. With such a serious tone that is more adjacent to a spy and espionage thriller, you can now create outstanding sequences with crazily high suspense throughout. No other Star Wars property would have the patience to deliver something as great as the Gorman Massacre or Cassian extracting Mon Mothma. They'd be reduced to superficial spectacle-driven action scenes that leave little emotional impact. This also goes past just a writing perspective and also goes into directing, cinematography, editing, and how the music builds the tension as well. Every aspect of Andor is created with such unity and precision that it's so refreshing, instead of the plague of other Star Wars properties that include studio interference. If Disney wants Star Wars to be successful moving into the future, they have to keep in mind the demographic of Star Wars as a whole, which then unlocks a new tier of storytelling that leads to grander and more substantial payoff. And I'd also argue that teenagers will still love Andor because the dramatic aspects are still richly compelling. You can't stifle the passion of writers and creators with bullshit requirements of making all of your content kid-friendly. It's the classical out-of-touch executive approach in that, in striving to create a product that is completely inoffensive and safe, you're now risk-free and your story is thus not daring and interesting. Like, I'm honestly shocked they allowed some of the scenes that transpired in Andor to happen, and hopefully this will operate as a shift to be more accepting of adult-like scenes. Because Star Wars in general fundamentally covers very dark concepts. If you're shying away from those topics and not covering them with the seriousness they deserve, then you're inherently failing on how effective the story can be. Not to mention the fact that we're also dealing with weapons that dismember people, so maybe we should destroy the illusion that this is a franchise for kids. A third lesson Disney should be learning from Andor has to do with verisimilitude. For films specifically, this entails making your world feel real and authentic. This is achieved especially by Andor by having a very grounded approach to the story and how they present the world. One great way this is expressed is through sets and where they're filming the show. Some examples being, most exterior locations on Coruscant are actually real. You'd probably recognize the Senate especially because that place has been used in multiple other movies and shows, like Westworld Season 3 or in Doctor Who. If your fake world is based on real locations, then that's an easy way to sell to the audience that your fictional environment is real by association. It cheats having to build unattainably complex and crazy structures that should be inhabiting these worlds. And instead, they're taking this location from our own reality and integrating it into its own, imbuing the fictional environment with something that's tangible. This is something that you can't cheat on a green screen soundstage, and instead, it's more worthwhile to utilize CGI set extensions, bringing that fictional world to the real location. Also, just to point something out that may go unnoticed, but one aspect for some of these locations is that they include large bodies of water. And water reflects the skyline, so all the CGI buildings have to be reflected in the water, meaning that this is probably all replaced in post. Goes to show that the creators are willing to use that budget just to make the world feel even more authentic. And most people probably won't even register or appreciate this because the creators are doing their jobs so effectively that you just accept this as not being fake. This is also just one location, and Season 2 has a lot of Coruscant exteriors, and it's really impressive that they are able to have such a large collection of great locations. Other than that though, the way they integrate and methodically use props is always so detailed, they elaborate on sci-fi mechanics in great depth, and even Luthen's entire job revolves around artifacts that further illustrates the point that there are so many pieces of history throughout the universe. Him talking about any of that is always cool to hear about, and I especially love the scene where Clea had to get a listening device out of a gallery with encroaching Empire officials. This all goes back to that sense of verisimilitude, and having the world be this grounded allows you to suspend your disbelief and makes everything more immersive, allowing the audience to create a deeper connection with the world, story, and characters that are inhabiting it. A quick fourth lesson with Andor is proof that you can create an interesting story out of anything. Basing stories on pre-established characters doesn't guarantee success by any means. If anything, it leads to something more worrying behind the scenes where executives are wanting stories to be told, but that requires finding a passionate creative voice to tell it, which is not easy. This is why The Force Awakens, as an example, essentially copies A New Hope because they couldn't come up with an original and interesting story with a fast encroaching deadline. Not only this, but you're also working within greater limitations because you can't compromise a pre-established timeline or break certain characteristics. Like, Obi-Wan's story is kind of odd because he's mostly supposed to be in exile, but he ends up meeting every single main character despite that not being alluded to in the original trilogy. On a technicality, Cassian isn't an original character because we're giving a show to someone from Rogue One, but we know so little about him from that movie that a show will greatly flesh him out. Along with introducing some iconic characters, Andor doesn't have to worry about stepping on the toes of other stories in this period, or at least to a major degree. And it's kind of insane the restraint Tony Gilroy has in not including popular characters like Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader. Literally, if anyone else was writing this, I guarantee you they would include Palpatine at some point. That's actually what I assumed when I saw the crazily high IMDb ratings, and immediately rolled my eyes assuming there would be some major cameos. But the opposite was true. Tony Gilroy built some of the best content in Star Wars to date while solely relying on the characters and story built up thus far from its own show, proving that you don't need to fall back on popular pre-established characters to create something iconic. If you're nothing without your cameos, then you shouldn't have them. In essence, Star Wars is such a richly dense universe to the point that you really don't need to rely on recognizable characters. This universe operates as an endless sandbox, and you can create so many amazing stories if your creativity and skill as a writer allows it. Unfortunately though, I'd be surprised if Disney actually follows this because they don't seem to be the best at weeding out the good and the bad. So yeah, those are the 4 main lessons that Disney needs to take away from Andor to save this franchise. And there are definitely more you can extract from Andor. Thank you for watching, and let me know in the comments what you thought about Andor Season 2. My Letterboxd, Discord, and Patreon links are in the description, and have a great day. Thank you to my amazing top patrons Logan Farmer and Simply Put.